Being asked to play Sandokan was one of the greatest honors that any actor could ever be given. And I was the lucky one. Sandokan fights for the freedom of his people against the British. Sandokan! And he epitomizes romance because he falls in love with an English girl even as he fights her country. Sandokan is the hero in each one of us.
We will, of course, talk about Sandokan a little bit down the line. But if I could just make a comparison, Kabirji, between Sandokan being a Malaysian prince slash pirate who had an English love interest and they were both fighting the British together, it seems to resonate a lot with your parents' story. And did that come across?
You're very perceptive to have spotted that. In fact, sometimes I tell Italian interviews when they ask me about Sandokan, I said, my father was the original Sandokan. He was the revolutionary fighting the British. He was the one who married an English girl. They faced the British together. You're very perceptive in that because it is true. And when I played Sandokan, which is the role of a pirate with a freedom fighter, I think the experience and the journey of my father was certainly a great inspiration to me because I related to that kind of passion he felt for the country, for his cause, for his people. And I grew up seeing that. And it was able to help me bring a great authenticity to the role of Sandokan, a great power, because it was the power of belief. And that's the strongest power in the world. So I've got to thank my father for giving me that, and my mother for giving me that background that made me so right for the role.
Yes, absolutely. And I do thank you for that because I wasn't sure if I was clutching at straws here when I made the comparison.
No, it's very perceptive of you to see
thank you so much for
comparisons,
that.
yes.
For sure. Okay, so let me just come back to Sandokan, Kabirji. Obviously, the entire series was based on books, and because we are a podcast about books, after all, it's in the title, so we definitely have to touch a little bit upon the origins of Sandokan. So Emilio Salgari, the writer, he wrote it a long time ago, about 100 years back, and it was translated into every other European language except English. So my question to you would be that are English translations readily available now in today's time in India? Okay.
Yes, they are.
And if memory serves me right, I think that there's about 11 Sandokan books. Would you happen to have a favorite out of the 11 that have been published?
I can't say. I'm attached to the same ones that because they took the Sandokan series that I did based on two books.
Right.
They were sort of combined together. And they created an original screenplay. Right. So I'm connected to those two books because they're the ones that I related to the most. But Sandokan was like, if you have to think of him, you have to think of him like a Robin Hood. Every English child knows who Robin Hood is. Right. Every Italian child knew Emilio Salgari, and many European children did too. And so, and mind you, Sandokan had been made as a film before I did Sandokan. There was a film with Steve Reeves, who was Mr. World, right, that they made, and that film went nowhere, it tanked. But then when they made the television series with me, it became the biggest success European television had ever seen. It had a 32% share, for those who understand what that means. It's astonishing. And literally traffic stopped on the streets of Italy when it was screened. Whenever I went out, it was crowds, a jam, everything. It was like, after entering the Beatles, I experienced Beatlemania in Italy. And not just Italy, Spain, France, Germany, all these countries. And in fact, I just went to Spain. In Italy, first I released the copy of the Italian edition of my book. I'm trying to see if I have a copy here. The Italian edition of my book was released last year. And then this year, I released the Spanish edition of my book. And it's amazing, that all these years later, they still remember me. because the Sandokan series keeps getting shown over and over on television. So it is not only Sandokan's comebacks to Spain, but he's writing his life story. So it becomes wall-to-wall coverage in the media. And I'm so grateful for all the love that these countries give me. I think Italy and Spain were the biggest. I think that Sandokan mania has faded somewhat in France and Germany now. But even today, in Italy and Spain and many countries in South America, it's wide awake. When I went to Cuba, they were serenading with Sandokan songs on the streets of Havana when I went there a few years ago for the cigar conference. And so Sandokan was just a 6-hour series. That's the thing people have to realize. It was just 6 hours, not some long-running series. Right. Then they made another 6 hours a few years later. Then they made another 6 hours a few years later. So it went, but my initial fame that got me European stardom, that led to all the films that I did with Europe, that led to all the honors that Italy gave me, started with those 6 hours of a series called Sandokan.